Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here, and I guess I'm a little disappointed that you're having chicken today on Kansas Day. We should be having meat. It's a much more patriotic food for us Kansans. But we'll talk about chicken today and some other meats. As Dwight said, I have been studying the meat and poultry industry for a long time, and I have published a book called Slaughterhouse Blues, the meat and poultry industry in North America. It makes wonderful gifts for your vegan friends. So I was asked to talk about that, so I'm going to talk about modern meat and a lot of things about it. I should also say that my colleague Jennifer Ng is here, who is with me, we spent the fall semester in Garden City studying the schools, and we hope to be writing and talking about that for a long time to come, but not yet. Meat is what Mary Douglas calls a natural symbol. It is the food most directly associated with the ideas of both symbolic and functional power. But meat is also abhorred as an inexcusable exploitation of our fellow creatures, blamed for a host of diseases, and accused of causing the destruction of the tropical rainforest, global warming, and widespread hunger. It has, in fact, become the symbol of a balance needing to be restored, or a cultural challenge aimed at rebuilding and reshaping attitudes on food issues. Over the course of the 20th century, American agriculture steadily and relentlessly industrialized. Small, largely self-sufficient farms, relying on a mixture of crops, livestock, and wild foods, gave way to highly mechanized and highly capitalized large ones, producing a limited range of crops for commodity markets. As control of our food system shifted from independent farms to highly concentrated and vertically integrated agribusinesses, agriculture became an industry, manufacturing food, fiber, and fuel. Three structural forces undergird agricultural industrialization: intensification, concentration, specialization. Intensification occurs when farmers increase purchases of non-farm inputs, fertilizer, machinery, agrochemicals, and they use those to improve their yields. Advances in selective breeding have reduced the time it takes an animal to reach slaughter weight, in turn, which allows farmers to increase their output. That chicken that some of you ate today was 10 weeks from the day that egg was laid until that animal went to town to be slaughtered. But production cost increased faster than the prices farmers receive for their animals and crops. And so in turn, intensification produces pressure on them to increase their outputs ever more. Concentration means that fewer but larger units use economies of scale to produce a greater share of the output of a particular commodity. So, producing calves on a ranch with 500 cows costs half as much per cow as producing calves on a ranch with fewer than 50. Production costs on farms with more than 3,000 hogs are nearly a third less per hog than on farms with fewer than 500. And so, these economies of scale have driven hundreds of thousands of cow, calf, and hog operators out of business, as you'll see in this figure here. And so that leaves the largest producers in control of most of the production. Specialization is the natural outgrowth of intensification and concentration, which means that fewer products are grown on each farm and in each region. Cattle feeding gravitated to the high plains of Texas, Kansas, and Nebraska. Hog barns, well, I should say that Iowa is still first in hog production, but the industry has expanded to North Carolina, Oklahoma, these hog barns are in Oklahoma, and Utah. Chicken houses, or poultry production, more than doubled between 1980 and 2009, with most of the growth in an arc from East Texas to North Carolina. These chicken houses are in western Kentucky. There are 16 chicken houses in that complex. Each of them house about 27,000 birds, and they go through about 7 flocks per year. Concentrated animal feeding operations, commonly called CAFOs, have become the norm for producing livestock. This is a CAFO. Problems arise from the excessive size and density of the CAFOs, and the biggest problem is manure disposal. These houses are in Webster County, Kentucky, where I'm from. It is the county with the most chicken houses in the state of Kentucky. There are 227 of these houses in that one county. Farmers apply manure to fields before planting, but if levels, well, the biggest problem, of course, is disposing of this manure. So each chicken produces about a pound of dry manure for every pound of game. So farmers apply that manure to fields before planting. But if the levels exceed nutrient absorption rates of soil and crops, then runoff will occur and ground and surface water pollution will increase. The poultry industry pioneered vertical integration in agribusiness. Poultry firms, called integrators, supply contract growers with birds hatched at company facilities, which must be fed with company grain and slaughtered at company processing plants. Tyson Foods, the largest poultry company in the United States, contracts with about 6,000 of what it calls family farmers to grow its chickens. These growers are expected to grow the birds to slaughter weight as quickly and as cheaply as possible. If Tyson is not satisfied, it may cancel grower contracts with little notice and even less recourse. By the 1980s, 95% of broilers sold in the United States were grown under production contracts with fewer than 40 firms. Poultry became the model for pork. In the early 1980s, less than 5% of U.S. hogs went to market under some type of contract. In 2008, 9 out of 10 hogs were committed to packers through direct ownership or contract. Whoops. Can you back that up, I guess, if it wants to? Just go back one. There we go, okay. 4 companies, Tyson, JBS, Cargill, and National, control more than 83% of the U.S. beef slaughter in 2010. And beef packers are emulating poultry and pork processors by owning their own cattle and contracting with feeders to raise them. Between 50 and 80% of the cattle now slaughtered in the United States are secured through what is called captive supply. These are forward contracts, formula pricing, packer ownership, or feeders who have only one viable buyer. These methods allow packers to drive down prices for independent producers who depend on markets controlled by only a very few buyers. Rising affluence during the 20th century increased our meat consumption, even as meat preferences were also changing. Consumption of beef peaked in the United States in 1976 and has since trended downward, thanks to medical reports that a diet rich in animal fat and cholesterol increases risk of heart disease and strokes, and to popular diatribes against the beef industry and also to its cost. As beef consumption fell, consumption of chicken soared. Interestingly, pork has not been subjected to the same medical and public scrutiny as beef, and consumption of pork has remained largely unchanged during the last century. Meeting changes in demand has meant an expanding and quickening the pace of meat production and processing. Critics charge that faster processing line speeds translate into greater likelihood that meat will be contaminated by manure or the content of animal stomachs. According to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, 1 in 6 Americans, 48 million people, contract a foodborne illness every year. Antimicrobials and antibiotics promote growth and prevent disease in livestock, and they are used extensively in U.S. agriculture. The Animal Health Institute, which represents companies that make animal medicine, puts the figure of 18 million pounds of antibiotics and antimicrobials being used in animal agriculture every year. They're used both for therapeutic purposes and also for non-therapeutic purposes. This 18 million pounds dwarfs the 3 million pounds used every year in human medicine. No one opposes treating sick animals with antimicrobials, but the Union for Concerned Scientists and the Pew Campaign for Animal Health say that they should not be given to healthy food animals on industrial farms to promote growth and to compensate for the effects of overcrowding and unsanitary conditions. Critics say meatpacking has returned to the days of the jungle, by Upton Sinclair, and industry spokespersons scoff at what they claim are simplistic comparisons to those days and point to remarkable progress in ergonomics and injury reduction, food quality and safety. No one can deny many of its transformations, most evident in poultry processing, which has led the way in mechanization and also further processing of their basic product. Machines now work alongside of men and women on meat and poultry lines, but jobs on the line remain tedious, monotonous, risky. And workers who fill them rarely earn a living wage. Here are wages in 2010, average wages, and what you'll see, and then comparing to the average wage for manufacturing, you'll see that the average wage paid to meat and poultry workers is about half or less of the average manufacturing wage. And then here you'll also see the federal poverty line and the income level for children being eligible for free and reduced lunches. And what you will see there is meat and poultry workers are the working poor. They rarely earn enough money to fully support themselves. And so what that means is that they often draw on federal and state programs, on local charities, on food banks to supplement their income. And so the industry offsets its cost of production and adds to the hidden cost of our cheap food by paying its workers below a living wage.
It's like Walmart.
Like Walmart. Work on the kill floor and processing line has always been dangerous. By the time I began studying meatpacking in the mid-1980s, workers were bedecked from their hard hats and earplugs to their steel-toed and rubber-soled boots in an amazing array of gear intended to protect them from injury. Even so, from the mid-1970s until the end of the 20th century, meatpacking had the highest injury and illness rate of any industry in the United States. It peaked at about 46 per 100 in the early 1990s. And that was about 3 times the average manufacturing injury rate. There you'll see the rates over time from 1975 to 2010. The most significant illnesses and injuries in modern meatpacking plants are associated with musculoskeletal disorders arising from repetitive motions such as carpal tunnel syndrome. Just to briefly aside, an average meatpacking, the line speed in a beef plant is about 400 head an hour. In a hog plant, it's about 1,000 head an hour. In a chicken plant, it's about 200 birds a minute. And so each worker does whatever she or he does thousands upon thousands of times every day. Each worker gets a 15-minute break about 2.5 hours into his shift and a 30-minute break at lunch, and that's it. The most significant, as I said, the most significant injuries then are musculoskeletal injuries that come from repeating the same thing thousands of times a day. In 2000, President Bill Clinton issued ergonomic standards to reduce on-the-job repetitive motion injuries. Within days of taking office in 2001, President George W. Bush repealed those standards, saying his administration would pursue a comprehensive approach to ergonomic injuries. This comprehensive approach consisted of voluntary guidelines for specific industries and laxer injury reporting requirements. In 2002, OSHA issued a new work accident report form that eliminated the column for musculoskeletal disorders. In 2003, it decided that employers do not have to record when workers report ergonomic injuries. There still is no requirement for businesses to report such injuries, even long after President Bush left office. And so the effect has been dramatic. Between 2000 and 2010, meatpacking's occupational injury and illness rate plummeted, as you see here, from about 25 per 100 full-time workers to around 9. The rate for poultry workers dipped from 14 per 100 to about 6. Despite these dramatic declines, the non-fatal injury rate in meatpacking remains twice the rate for manufacturing in general. And rates for repeated trauma went from 8 per 100 workers in 2000 to who knows what in 2010, because the government no longer collects those data. But what about animals? The U.S. government does not regulate farm animal welfare until animals go to slaughter. Instead, it relies on the stewardship of farmers and ranchers and industry guidelines. Each major farm animal producer group has its own science-based animal welfare guideline. Audit and certification under these guidelines are voluntary. The Farm Animal Welfare Council has concluded that killing may only be the final stressor in a sequence of equally or more stressful events in the lives of industrial farmed animals. Prevalent industry practices foster what are called production diseases. These have become endemic. Chickens are bred for large breasts, and these large-breasted birds suffer from leg problems. Dairy cows are bred for milk production, and they often suffer from inflammation of the udder. Animals kept in close confinement develop obsessive, repetitive movements. Animal protectionists are pushing the industry to abolish long-standing practices they consider unnatural and the cause of great pain and suffering. Close confinement of dairy calves in veal production, gestation and farrowing crates for hogs. Let's see one. Beak trimming, forced molting, and confinement of laying hens to battery cages in egg production. Animal rights and animal welfare have become global issues, and corporations and governments are responding to calls for more humane treatment of farmed animals. Standards for farm animal welfare in the United States lag far behind those in Europe. But pressure has steadily mounted on the industry to improve its record on farm animal welfare and humane slaughter. Although the federal government has resisted regulating farm animal welfare, several states have enacted laws to phase out hog gestation, Oregon and Florida, to phase out veal and hog crates, Arizona, California, Colorado, Maine, to give laying hens more space, California, Michigan, Ohio, and California has banned importation of eggs that have been produced in crowded cages. The real push for reform, however, is coming from food retailers who can put direct pressure on their suppliers. Fast food chains are mandating improved standards for the care and slaughter of the animals they purchase and are using random third-party audits to ensure compliance. Chipotle Mexican Grill has been the company that has done the most in this, and they're using their concern for animal welfare and local food sourcing as a major advertising campaign. As a nation, we are at a crucial juncture in how we produce, process, consume, and even think about food. Stretching before us are two alternative futures. One, a dominant industrial paradigm that relies on corporate agriculture and food oligopolies. And on the other side is an emerging alternative paradigm that focuses on food that is produced locally, naturally, and sustainably on family farms under socially just conditions. Advocates of industrial agriculture argue that CAFOs, or factory farms, are the most cost-effective means of producing meat, milk, and eggs. They credit this production model with giving us the cheapest food in human history and also the safest. They say CAFOs make better use of available resources, decrease deforestation, and actually reduce the environmental impact of meat production. They dismiss critics of this model as being anti-modern, with nothing better to offer than a retreat into the past, and they argue that the idea of green, organic, local food systems that are both sustainable and secure is nothing but a bunch of bull. Advocates of this ecological alternative model counter that food produced by industrial methods is cheap only because it externalizes most of its costs. They say it cannot compare with pastoral, artisanal foods for freshness or taste, nor is it particularly safe for those who produce or eat it. And its environmental consequences are well known. Influential voices for alternative production models, our own Wes Jackson, Wendell Berry, Michael Pollan, argue that industrial agriculture's economies of scale are only one way to measure efficiency, and they're not the most accurate way. They say that if we compute all the actual costs of our food, inputs, production and transportation costs, environmental, community, and individual health, that localized, diversified, integrated ecological modes of production are far more efficient and sustainable than industrial ones. Although still a tiny part of the total market, consumer demand for organic and natural foods is rapidly growing. In response, supermarkets are stocking more local and regional foods and selling natural, grass-fed, free-range, antibiotic-free meats. Restaurant chains are responding to public demand for hormone and antibiotic-free natural foods. Reflecting this trend, 69% of respondents in a recent market survey of the United States said they are willing to pay more for ethically produced foods. When asked what they meant by ethical food, more than 90% identified three main qualities